So today we are gonna learn about hoisting in JavaScript. So before we learn about hoisting in JavaScript, we should learn about how our JavaScript code is executed by something known as JavaScript engine, and where do these JavaScript engines reside. So basically these JavaScript engine basically reside in our browsers. For Chrome it's basically known as V8, for Edge it's Chakra, and for Firefox it's basically Spider Monkey. JavaScript code is basically executed by these engines in a two-step process, and the two steps of that process are basically, first one is the compilation and the second one is the execution of that compiled code by these engines. So this compilation phase of our code is known as just-in-time compilation. Now what do we mean by just-in-time compilation? We basically mean that the code that is getting compiled is going to be executed just milliseconds after it's actually compiled, and this is slightly different from your traditional compiled languages. So for example, if we take the example of C++, there we basically write our code, basically then compile our code, and then whenever we wanna run, we run our code, run or execute our code. But it's not the same with JavaScript. It has to the code that gets compiled, it basically gets executed just milliseconds after it has been compiled. Although there are various other steps involved in the process, that is your code is optimized for furthermore by the JS engine, but we will not go into that much detail. For let's now stick to our compilation process. So now during this compilation process, the compiler or your JS engine only cares about declaration. It leaves the assignment set. Now what do I mean by that? So if you look at this statement, that is where a equals to 10, while we might be tempted to think that this statement, that is where a equals to 10, is a single statement, but for the engine this is not the case. For the JS engine, it's basically essentially there are two statements. One is the declaration part, that is where a, that is, and other one is the initialization part or the assignment part, that is a equals to 10. So during this compilation phase, what really happens is that memory is allocated to the variables and identifiers. Now coming on to the definition that you might have seen of hosting, that is variables and function declaration or definitions are moved at the top. So this basically means that during the compilation phase, our JS engine would basically skim through your code and search for the declarations of variable declarations and function declarations, and basically allocate memory to variables and basically move them at the top of the lexical scope. What better way to understand something other than by going through some examples? So let's take one example of hoisting, then we'll move on to and then we'll see some more examples. So let's start with the very basic example, that is where a equals to 10. So I write this statement and then I do this console log a, and then I save this. So what do you expect the output to be? Obviously we expect the output to be 10, and that's what it would be. Basically we can basically run this thing, and then yes, the output is 10, but we really need to know what's happening under the hood. So how the JavaScript engine sees this piece of code. So if you remember, like I told, JavaScript engine would basically see this line as two statements. What I meant by that is that it would see it as follows: like it would see this variable declaration, then it would see the initialization or the assignment, and then it would see the console log statement. So this is how our basically JavaScript engine sees this piece of code. Now let's say if I modify it a bit, if I do console.log a before even declaring this, so what do you think happens? I would suggest you to just pause this video for a few seconds and then think over this. Okay, so let's moving on to the solution for this one. So as we have talked about, this statement would be where a equals to 10 would be basically equivalent to two statements for our JavaScript engine. And we also know that in Java, in basically during hoisting, during the compilation phase, hoisting occurs, and the declarations are moved at the top. So what I meant by that is basically this. So if we see, let's see what this code would look like for the compiler. So basically our variable declaration would have moved at the top, then would have come the console log a statement, and then there would have been this statement, that is 10, a equals to 10, the assignment, and then again there would have been console log of a. So what really happened is this, the variable declaration has moved at the top. And one more thing to note here is that this variable a, it would have been initialized with a value of undefined, and this is only the case with when we use var keyword to define the variables. So I would say the output for this piece of code should be undefined, as we see that as it comes in as the execution comes to this line, that is basically this line, it sees that var a has been defined and its value is undefined. Now the assignment part comes in, that is a equals to 10. So basically a has been assigned a value of 10, so now this should print a value of 10. Now let's run this code and see what's the output actually. So there you see that the first console log basically printed undefined and the other one printed 10. That is because this is the code that the engine actually sees. So let's move on to solve some more questions related to hoisting, so that we can consolidate our knowledge about hoisting even further.